All right, ladies and gentlemen, it is your favorite Dark Sorcerer kicking off this week, early Sunday morning, 12:04 a.m. Tonight is a great night. We're in the devil's hour between midnight and 4 a.m. A lot of people believe that a lot of spiritual activity happens around this time. Normally, it's between 1 and 4. Hello, Seeking Serpent. Welcome to this channel. A lot of people believe that demonic activity happens at this time of the morning, that it's the polar opposite of that of the right wing. You're welcome. Now, I've been getting a lot of requests from individuals that would like me to touch further on necromancy. Some individuals are planning, if not seeking, to get in there, into this path of necromantic rituals, the path working of necromancy. A lot of people don't realize that this path can lead you into areas most occultists are uncomfortable getting into. It's kind of like going into Satanism. You know, just the term or the name would turn away most people. Okay, or they'd get the wrong idea about what's in it. Now, necromancy has been associated. Hey, Drago, how you doing? Now, there are two types of necromancy in the world, especially that of the old days. I'm not talking this new age stuff like, say, Christian Day or Lucian Raphael. Although I would recommend that you go out and get just these two. And that's right off the bat. They have a lot of history. They really did their homework on the path itself. Christian even gives a good reference in the appendixes, A, B, and C, of the herbalism that can be utilized within an oleum. Okay, even a relaxing herbal state. Okay, to help you to get into that mind frame. Now, the two types of known necromantic rituals are reanimation and conjuration. Okay. Now, this is the divining moment between both, and I'm going to break it down for you. Number one, let's look at conjuration. Okay. Those of you who have been in demonolatry or some form of spiritual communion with some form of entity out there. Okay, be it the Ugan, the Loa, the Djinn, or say angels or demons in more modern day. Okay, these things in general bring up evocation through utilization of glyphs or sigilliums. Okay, geometric shapes such as the circle of empowerment, the triangle of evocation. In ancient times, say 400 or 500 years ago, even as far back as, say, the 11th, 12th, and 13th century, okay, you're going to see ministers of the right-hand path dressed in their robes, always two people, the master and the apprentice. standing in a circle of empowerment where the spirit fully manifested in the triangle of evocation. This here is a prime example of what you can seek within, say, the Grand Grimoire, Red Dragon. Okay. And, you can get that one off eBay or Amazon real cheap. But this book here, compared to the original Grand Grimoire, really gives a huge amount of information just on necromancy. Okay. I really like that. But it's not just about conjuring spirits. It's also about learning from them. It's about communing with them and getting to know them. It's about going beyond the mundane, the physical, and going into the spiritual, if not the spirit world in general. Much like transcendence into other planes of existence. Many worlds speak of 3 realms or 3 levels. Okay, the number 3 is a numerological number that really defines a lot of things. You got heaven, purgatory, hell. Okay, you look into Greek, the Norse, you go into Germanic, Europe, European countries. You're going to see the same 3 elements: the celestial, the shadow, and the spiritual, even in pagan and Wiccan traditions. Okay? And the thing that you got to really take into consideration here is when you conjure one of these beings, it's best to utilize articles of clothing that they died in or even worn. A lot of practitioners really conjure within the last year, maybe the last 2 or 3 years. They'd go out and get the clothing that they were buried in. They would wear something that that person connected to, and they would conjure them to bring them forth spiritually, a spiritual apparition. More modern day, however, is a different story. In today's world, it's associated with blood sorcery. It's associated with magnetics. Okay? But it's not just that. Sorceress Cagliostro, the necromancer, wrote the Blood Sorcery Bible, Volume 1 and Volume 2. Now, the thing that I found interesting about those 2 books is in Volume 1, she gives at least 20, if not 30 pages just on medical areas to strengthen in your own body. Now, we look back at the myths in the legends just on what I just said here about that particular book, the Blood Sorcery Bible, Volume 1. Okay? Here we're going to see the myths of necromancers performing unimaginable things. Okay? From raising legions of dead to bringing a corpse back from the dead. Look at the Witch of Endor within the Bible. Okay? The Bible speaks between the Old Testament and the New right on necromancy, sorcery, witches, warlocks. Again, this is just a title, okay, given to somebody who performs in art. Now, this is where I really want to get into 2 aspects. A name, necromancy. Let's break this down. Necromancy. Hello, Nina. Canada, huh? Cool. Always wanted to go there, but never had a chance. least not yet anyways. Necromancy can be broken down into two words. Necro, meaning corpse, and mancy, meaning the art of, okay, the practice of divination, okay? Now, in this sense, it is surrounding the juvenation or rejuvenation of a corpse, okay? But what's interesting to note about necromancy is that it's associated with corpses, which is why it's associated with the zombie myths within voodoo, okay? Specifically that of Haitian voodoo, all right? You go into the Tibetan Book of the Dead or the Egyptian Book of the Dead, okay? You're going to see how these priests, these necromancers, utilize these books and their viewpoints on death. The Tibetan Book of the Dead looks at it much in the same way as the Ouroboros, okay? The infinity. Life follows death and death follows life, okay? Now, the Egyptian Book of the Dead, on the other hand, they have curses, hexes. They have methods of bringing the dead back to life. Okay, sometimes you'll see them in two. Look at King Tut's tomb, the mythos behind it. You look at all the people that drop dead after entering into that tomb. You see my point. Curses and mummification. Okay, necromancy. Cool. Yeah, DH has some interesting things. Hello, Ethan. Now, what's interesting to note about this type of necromancy is that the Egyptians were one of the most earliest traditions of necromancy. Necromancia, okay, in a sense. It is one of those things where they tied hexcraft or cursing along with mummification and zombie. Think of it as Haitian voodoo, okay? In Haitian voodoo, they really took great care in burying their dead, their ceremonies, every last detail. Okay? And I want you to think about this for a second. Haitian voodoo, the Boko or Bokor, all right? The Bokor uses different species of pufferfish, namely the venom or the poison, the gases of giant toads, and the poisons from tree frogs. Okay? Now, take into consideration that there's other ingredients in this. And this really does classify the type of practitioner. And this is why. Each practitioner has their own method of creating the zombie powder. Okay? You heard me right. The zombie powder. Now, when I first started getting into necromancy again, after almost a decade, and this was through Sumner Dreadwood's books, the Mazajira Cabal system, specifically that of Charnel Whispers. Okay. I really got into it because of the fact that it touched on a lot of things I already knew. However, it touched on things that caught my interest, things that I learned and really learned, like going into the Drelith, the Sith, the Banshee, going into vampiric practices, going into the Ghoul, the Wraith, okay, the Reaper, zombies, lycanthropes, all these myths, even the Hellhound, known as the Black Dog, okay, really fit well with necromancy. And this is because of the spiritual context on how you bring them back through rejuvenation and or conjuration. Now, One of the authors that I like in modern day, outside of Lucian Raphael and Christian Day, is right here, S. Connolly. She's a good friend of mine. And the funny thing is that her first book was literally on necromancy, the art of demonolatry, necromancy. She introduced the spiritual context of this work. Most people, when they get into necromancy, they try to take it back to around 500 years ago. And that's where they normally stick to. They don't go beyond that. She literally takes it into the way it used to be, where, like the shaman, you always kept one foot in the grave and the other in the material world. All right. Now, what do I mean by this? Okay. Think of it this way. Anybody who does any form of spiritual working, they leave one foot in the grave or one foot in the spiritual world. The more you get acquainted with the Da'ath energies from the apothic system of, say, Hermetics, the Kabbalah, the tree of life, or the tree of death in this case, you're going to see the combination of coming in contact with death itself, or at least what I refer to as an agent of death. Through my own personal research into necromancy over the years, I've always discovered three things that fit with necromancy. Number one, necromancy is associated with spiritual conjuration, such as graveyards, corpses. Look at the Witch of Endor. Okay, prime example. Look at Jesus Christ in the Bible. He brought back Lazarus and the centurion's daughter. Okay, three instances of necromancy right there. All right, but it doesn't stop there. All right, it really goes into a lot of different areas. Now, as I was moving from Egyptian into Roman, and Roman into Greek, Greek into European or Indo-European, I started seeing a much larger picture because everybody had a different point of view. Look at Eliphas Levi in the book Doctrine and Ritual of High Magic. You can even go into Richard Cavendish's book, The Black Arts. Okay. Near the end, he really talks a lot about Eliphas Levi's reaction when he got into a necromantic working in England, namely London, where he was invited. He was invited to join this coven, this group, this circle of practitioners. But one woman took him aside in a carriage, gave him a certain amount of time to gather the supplies that he would need, handed him a paper, a scroll, with everything he's going to need. And he set it up. It said that he did this over 3 days. Which time he had such a bad reaction to the manifested spirit that he left England and went back to his home country. He went back to the Klapoth, the Kabbalah system, the Hermetics, never to do that level of necromantic practices again, black magic in general. And this really brings me to the second name, the second term, nigromancy. Nigromancy is the art of black magic. Negro meaning black, mancy meaning art or practice of. Okay. It's kind of like working with demons, really. You get that rotted egg smell, the sulfur smell, which is interesting. Exactly, hoodoo and voodoo. There's two different classifications, the Boko and the Bokor. They're practices within the bodies, the corpses, and that of herbalism, alchemy even, really play a huge part. But as I was saying, the art of Necromancy is spiritual, okay? The art of calling forth the spirits in a form of chiromancy, okay? Today, when we deal with divination, we separate this one term into about a few different things, from empathic, telepathic, mediumship, seer, conjurer, and such like that, okay? But in the old days, chiromancy was the spiritual conjuration, and it was used in necromancy. However, necromancy at the time, nigromancy, over about 1,000 years ago, was associated with shamanism. This meant that they were using herbalism and alchemy in the same exact manifestation as with necromancy today. Okay. Now, one of the best books that I got on black magic was this one here, Ritual Magic, by Elizabeth M. Butler. Another one is The Fortunes of Faust. Okay. And then you have Conjuring Spirits. Okay. Text and Traditions of Medieval Ritual Magic. Now, those books there, they don't just break down the history of black magic. They discuss it in a form that is based off four grimoires: Solomon's Keys, Pope Honorius, the Grand Grimoire, and the Munich manuscripts. Okay. And that's what this book is made of. Okay. Forbidden Rites, a Necromancer's Manual of the 15th Century. Okay. Now, when I first got into conjuring spirits, it was a book that really defined from a logical point of view. It was more psychological in nature. It broke everything down, the methods that were used from various different grimoire writers. More so, once you get into the Forbidden Rites. The Forbidden Rites, however, really get down and dirty. I'm talking breaking it down into creating an army, raising an army through illusionist type tactics, bringing forth a feast, bringing forth a castle. Okay. And that's not even touching the basis. That's just 1% of that book. But they go hand in hand. And I found that very interesting because over the last couple of days, I've been just getting on Facebook and just watching while I was doing research and while I was digging further into necromancy. And then a book from Edgar Cavall came in the mail just the other day. Really liked it. I had to laugh that my essay was actually in front of S. Connolly's, but still, I figured she would have been before anybody because she's more known. She's more, publicized. But no, she was near the end of the book, and it was kind of interesting. But here's the kicker. In demonolatry, specifically that of the minor keys or lesser keys of Solomon, the Goetia, there are the 9 kings. Now, some people refer to them as being the most powerful group of demons out there. Well, when I delved into the other essays, now keep in mind, the only person that I actually recognized from that group, from that book outside of S. Connolly, was that of my good friend and brother, Edgar Cavall. All right. Now, the others I really didn't know much about. In fact, I've never even heard of them. Now, I've studied things on Incan philosophies, their traditions, because I have a friend who's Incan. But I never thought to get into Aztecs. Okay. And the good thing about the Aztec community, give me just a second here. I'm trying to find that book here. All right. Here we are. Now, you have the 9 kings worldwide mythos. The lords of the night, 9 of them. Okay. And they're found in the Codex Borgia, the Codex Tudela, and the Codex Telerano, otherwise known as the Riemann Cis. Okay. Then you have, obviously, the 9 kings. And I really found that interesting because you've also got the lords of Zybalba and the lords of Ybte. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right because it's YBTE. Okay. One of those weird spellings. Now, when I got into these, like I said, I've been doing a little bit of research into the Aztecs since I came across this one formulation. And I have to say that the author of the first essay in Sabbatica by that Edgar Cavall gave me, you know, he really nailed this because he opened my eyes on something that I didn't even know. And the guy's name is Lucas Gorkaki. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing his name right or not. I may have just slaughtered it. And if I did, I apologize. But yeah, he actually went into the history and the mythology of these kings and how they associate with the same symbology worldwide. So you're not looking at things from Middle Eastern to such as Babylonia, Sumeria, Acadia, even Surik, even. But you're looking at things worldwide from Incan to Aztec to Voodoo, getting into the American traditions, the Western and the Eastern. And you're seeing how these similarities go hand in hand. Now, what's interesting to note is the gods themselves within necromancy. When you start calling forth spirits, when you start calling forth these beings, and this is something that really I should stress, if you don't know what you're doing, don't do it. And if you really want to do it, get somebody that's more experienced in this art. Okay? Because this is where people end up getting hurt. Okay? Sometimes they end up doing things that they don't even have any recollection about. Okay? Because this is the area where necromancy really gets into the old days of signs, symbols, and omens, but more so demonic possession. Okay. I was talking earlier with a fellow admin, and she was talking about getting into necromancy after she's done with her thing. And as soon as I stopped with that, I was talking with somebody else, and they wanted to get into possession. Chiromancy is a method of calling these beings forth through necromantic rites. Look at Joseph Nunn, for an example. He goes by Baphomet Hex, or Baphomet Hex. Okay, right here on YouTube. He just uploaded a new video today that is based off all his possession experiences. You see how he starts acting weird, differently, almost animalistic. You see where his voice is, his voice is different. You see the look in his eyes almost glaze over, and it's like looking at somebody else. Now, this is where a lot of people get things mixed up. When you voluntarily call forth a spirit, when you conjure them forward, you're bringing them into our world. Back from the land of the dead, you're basically ripping them from the peaceful realms, and you're bringing them for divination purposes, such as being a seer, seeing the past, present, and future, to learning what they've learned in the spiritual world, such as learning from demons or angels, okay? Depending if you're going by the grimoire of Armadale or that of, say, White's Book of Demonology, okay? Either way, you're calling forth the spirit. You're calling for some kind of being from a different realm. Sometimes, if you do it wrong, you end up getting possessed. What was her name? H.P. Haggart. Okay. Catholic nun. Messed around with a Ouija board in college. Ended up with glowing red eyes. Strength of 10 men. The last thing she remembered was being in a circle with her friends. Next time she knew, she was out on the porch with no recollection of how she got there. Same thing applies. Ouija boards, tarot cards, you name it, they're all tied in to necromantic rituals. Okay? Now, tessomancy is another form of foresight. It's known today as tea readings. Now, you consider tea readings have been around for hundreds, if not thousands of years, a couple thousand at best. So you can guarantee that this practice is something that's just as old. Gypsies mostly use it, but nowadays it's all Wiccans and pagans. Necromancy, when you get into this stuff, cartomancy has been around since about the 11th century. It really kicked up around the 16th, 17th century with White and Eliphas Levi and such, and finally ending up with more modern day Aleister Crowley. Okay. And then kind of died out for a little bit, and now it's back. So these practices are real. They've been out there for hundreds of years. And you really need to understand that signs and symbols and omens play a huge part within it, from planetary. Okay. You get into any system worldwide, and you're going to find the systems and how they're tied into necromantic rituals. One of the biggest things is casting bones. Bones have been in necromancy rites for a long time. I'm talking going all the way back to the ancient old world. Okay. 2,000 years, if not 3. And that's just what's been written down and shared, preserved even. Different bones from skulls to hip bones, joint bones, the femur. A Boko in Malawi just a few years ago was arrested because he got off the bus and he was searched by the local authorities. And they found the severed limb of his sister. His sister in the bag. And according to Wudang belief, this type of action, or I should say the femur or the forearm, skull, brings power. It brings spiritual insight. And you can charge these bones up from any different thing, from protection to enhancing your own psychic or physical power. Okay? You can even bring it into hexcraft, cursing, charging it for your own altar. Now, the one thing I've noticed throughout my own personal research into necromancy in this area is that you would not believe the most common things that is associated with necromancers, from little amulets, to talismans, to little gems like rocks. Okay, that are considered plancies. Okay, and I'm using that as a planetary action. Okay, it is some kind of physical thing that's left on your altar that will connect and charge constantly per ritual. Even bones link your altar room in your space, be it outdoors or indoors, with that of the dead, the land of the dead. Getting in contact with the gods and goddesses such as Hel, Hecate, Circe. Getting in touch with Hades. Let's go with Loki. Let's go with Anubis, Supe. Okay, and that's not even getting into Aztec mythology. Okay, Native American lore. Okay, and seeing where all of this ties in. It really does tie in. And the more you get back into history, mythology, getting into art, you're going to see all of this stuff. So I thought I'd get on here and do part 1 of necromancy. Okay. And I wanted to share with you these books and these sources so that you can go out and get them for yourself and begin your journey and see, not only from a historical and mythological point of view, from a world's religions and philosophies, but to do more modern day. Sorceress Cagliostro is a medical technician. Morgue. She works in the morgue. She deals with blood sorcery. Incredible. Okay. Now, that I can't speak to. I do know that Kari does want to get into necromancy. That's actually the next thing that she wants to get into. Well, that is a good thing. Maybe I'll do that. All right. Now, for now, this is a good place to stop. So, the next time I come on, I'll be doing a ritual, seeing where they want us to go with this next. And until next time, thank you for joining in, and have a good night.